Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in Designing Futures interview series. This series is about empowering the next gen architects through innovative architecture and urban design. My name is Architect Christine Villaramon from the United Architects of the Philippines Singapore chapter. This series is in preparation for the World Architecture Day event that will happen on the 19th of October, interviewing trailblazers and leaders in the field of architecture and urban design. So we're going to introduce to you right now our next interviewee, which is architect William T. So architect William earned his master's in urban design from the National University of Singapore, here in Singapore, in 2012, and a bachelor's in architecture from the University of Santo Tomas in 2002. He founded WTA Architecture and Design Studio in 2007, leading the firm in completing a wide range of projects from retail, housing, and large-scale development. And he advocates social architecture that emphasizes a humanistic and socially relevant design. Hello, Architect William.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you for this time, for joining us, and we know you have a lot of insights. Maybe the first question we'd like to ask is, you're known for social architecture, as you said it, that is on humanistic and socially relevant design. Maybe you can expound on that. What does that mean?
Social architecture is the design principle or even a design agenda that kind of informs all our projects, really. So we've kind of been developing these ideas based around certain principles. Largely, firstly, it's about social intimacy. It's about bringing, spaces closer to people. Instead of us having to travel to places, we want to bring them with us where we are actually, or in our neighborhoods. It's also about creating barrier-free designs, allowing for better freedom of movement, creating architecture that does not discriminate against certain sectors, of the population. It's also about helping develop social infrastructure that helps build communities. So it's largely about these three things, and we've been using them in almost all our projects, especially the public sector ones.
That's nice. Maybe you can give some examples of some of your public sector projects that had kind of encapsulates the social architecture.
So for one, I think we're developing now. We finished building a stadium, and when you build stadiums, they often become white elephants because they're not usually used so much, right? So what we decided was that if we wanted to create a barrier-free stadium, what if we chopped off one end of a stadium, it becomes a U shape instead of a circle. And so this allows, basically freedom of movement and entry for people from the city. They can use it every day. They can jog there. They can, do their programs there. The students can practice there. So it becomes a public space, a much needed public space, especially during the pandemic where everyone wanted to be able to run around, So samples like that, by allowing, by opening up these public spaces, they become relevant to our everyday lives. I think an example of social intimacy is what we've been doing with libraries. This started with the Bookstop project around 2016. So, at first, of course, it was just us pushing it. And then eventually, I think we've managed to gain traction now. So the latest one, we opened the Open Book project with Ayala Land or Ayala Premier in Ayala Triangle. SM has the SM Book Nook in their malls. Philinvest will be putting one in Alabang now. And we're putting another one with Faith University in Batangas. So, slowly, I think as many as we can, if we can manage to get public libraries back into our daily lives, it's always a big social win. And so it's changing, it's changing how we try to perceive libraries as places we don't want to go to, into a vital part of the community that's part of our everyday life. So I think that's a very good example of social architecture.
Very, very, very interesting. And it's not just about architecture for the rich people, it's architecture. That's really like what the topic is right now. It's about designing for the future, and it's really empowering the community in not only in urban design, but also in of course in the architecture. And so in line with, of course, like urban design, we know you've studied urban design in NUS, and based on your practice, what are the most relevant and important trends in urban design right now?
I think all of us should try to stay away from trends and styles as architects and planners, because it has to be something that really will last, or stand the test of time, right? Especially when you're talking about the scale of a city or even a community. These are generational things,
Yes, it's true. Yeah.
So I think rather than looking at trends, we look at what's better. Of course, what's better for the community changes as we do more research, as we learn more about, social structures. And that's really what's more important, I think, that we do. So, I mean, one of the things that would probably be looking at is how we have to alleviate the heat island effect, we find in our urban centers.
Yes.
So for example, like I think something like every meter, of average tree coverage, height lowers the temperature by 0.1 degrees or something like that. So we have to look at these things, like we have to look at how spaces are shared. For example, you can have like small shared gardens, shared infrastructure, shared facilities. So I think it's about learning about these things, and especially for the next generation, I think urban design will be a bit more important because our cities are getting denser, and we will need, and we're getting more used to shared services. For example, like Grab, Uber,
Yes. Yes.
so stuff like that. So I think sharing economy is going to be impactful, especially for urban spaces.
Interesting, because I think you've touched on two things that are very important for the next generation, which is climate change and population growth, right? So like very interesting. And you did mention about like engaging the community on hearing, not just about trends, which is great, like listening to them. Like if you would advise like the younger architects or younger urban designers, how do we engage a community from your point of view, from your experience? How do you get that buy-in, and how do you listen in and get what is the best in terms of the context or the space?
I think sometimes we architects, we expect things to be done in certain ways with certain structures and processes and systems in place. But when you're dealing with various stakeholders, when you're dealing with public sector projects and the community, you have to be able to like understand and listen. Actually, you have to be willing to do the extra step. Sometimes things that are not really part of our job. So it's this willingness to engage, really, to do a back and forth. I think that is very important when you're working on these projects.
Interesting. And like really going deep dive, especially in the Philippines, where like it's not the linear path. There's a lot of like even for government, like how do you engage with the public sector? How do you engage with the government? Like what's your advice for our young designers, and based on your experience?
I think so many of us give up on our country so easily, especially in our government. And many times, architects were probably one of the first to bemoan the situations that we have in our urban centers.
Yeah.
And yet, many times, we also find that we're the first to give up. And so that doesn't work, right? If we see ourselves as the primary caretakers of the urban environment or the human environment, then we should participate in it. And so I think we have to want to be part, of the discussion, part of the solution, and not just say, raise our hands and say, okay. So I think that's very important to realize.
Like there's that resilience, and
it's not about resilience. It's not about resilience. It's about the grind. It's about doing what has to be done if you want to. Did we lose everyone?
I'm so sorry. My network was a bit.
Yeah, I think we lost you for a while.
Yes, yes. Sorry. I'm not sure where it was cut. Okay, but we'll cut it later on.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
no worries.
I'll repeat it again. So, I can sense that you're very passionate about making a difference.
Well, isn't
no,
that
no.
what architecture is about, right? Like if we weren't passionate, we'd just like be doing something more profitable with our time, right?
Yeah, no, because to go through to go and deep dive into, like communities, discussions back and forth, that takes resilience, that takes patience, and to actually, go through that process of getting buy-in from the government. We know it's not the easiest, especially in the Philippines, but that's something that's very admirable. That's something that's very inspiring. Like we understand, what you said about, most architects give up, but it's good that you're there, like you're holding on and really having that idealism, which and that passion, like to make a difference. So, like, how can you, what, how can young architects make a difference in shaping cities today? Like given the
I
situation.
remember I remember one of my I think there's a echo. Um, yeah, I remember one of my friends saying this all the time before, that anything that's good takes time. And I think that's something that, many of our younger architects should be aware of. Of course, the easy path is to do commercial work, but good architecture is really centered, on public spaces, public infrastructure, public buildings. Those are really the buildings that will be remembered and stand the test of time. And so I think there should be a renewed interest, in doing these spaces, these buildings. That's one thing. Another thing I believe is that, there's so many architects in our country, right? There's, I think, 70,000 of them, licensed architects, probably double that number, including the unlicensed ones, at least. So imagine with 150,000 architects, right? If each architect could talk to like 10 people in a month, that's 1.5 million people, right? If you could talk to 100 people in a year, that's 15 million people, right? But oftentimes we find that it's easier for us to talk about music, sports, movies, politics. But why can't we, talk about architecture? It doesn't have to be every minute of every day.
Yeah.
But I think we have to be conscious that, and we should not just be talking architecture with other architects. Sometimes the saddest part of it is that we architects are so passionate about sharing and pushing when we're talking to other architects, but it's like preaching to the choir, right? So who we really have to talk to are, the other stakeholders in our communities. And, even if it's hard, even if it means, repeating yourself, I think that's what especially young architects can do.
Nice. Very inspiring, Architect William. Very inspiring for, especially for the young architects. Like sometimes in the beginning of our careers, we just already get disillusioned. But this is what it is about. Like even from the very beginning when we studied architecture, it's really making a difference. But you've said, like, how many architects do we have? Like 70,000 architects, right? But what I heard from from my previous interviews as well, there's not many urban designers, not many in urban planning, and there's actually a need, especially for government positions. Like, how do you involve or encourage young architects to take part in urban design?
So I think the challenge with urban design is these are the interstitial spaces, and if you put it in the context of the Philippines, they're the neglected spaces. So for example, there are the sidewalks, the sheds, the waiting sheds, the walkways, the covered walks, the public stairs or public steps, public infrastructure, basically the railings, which no one wants to design because they don't seem to be able to make money out of these, right? And in fairness to a big chunk of the government, they actually would want architects to help them do these, but of course, very few are also interested. So I think the solution would be for more of our, young architects, especially when they're starting, to be part of the government. For them to be able to actually at least, insert some design understanding or urban design features or progressive features into much of our public social infrastructure, right? Because when you're inside, you can actually get all these small steps done, right? And you can then help push for better architecture, better planning, right? And without them being there, it's so hard, because then if the entirety of government is either lawyers or engineers, then you get the kind of stuff that they build, right? So if we want it to be better or more socially progressive, then I think we need architects to be involved.
And Architect William will vote for you in the next election.
I will. No, I mean, it's not about those elected officials, really. It's about the people who are
no, it's true. It's true.
Right? The civil service, if you may.
No, it's true. I did get from Architect Alcazaran that he was saying a lot of our lawyers, a lot are in the civil, and the awareness of design is not yet there. So it's harder to get a buy-in from the government because of that lack of language in terms of design. So, but it's very encouraging for what you have said, and hopefully through this interview, kind of open the minds of a lot of our young architects.
Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions about how government works, actually, and like I said, the first instinct is to complain and bemoan, but a better way is to be part of the solution, I think.
That's nice. Very nice. No, it's true. It's true. And we love your positive attitude, and that we can make a difference. And it's true. And it's very inspiring. It's really very appropriate about like empowering the next gen architects. And it is true that we do have, as architects, the power, like to change communities, and that is what you've been doing, and we appreciate that, like through your stadiums and through the libraries. And I hope there will be more people like you in our communities in the Philippines and even beyond. That's something that we are really inspired on. And thank you so much, Architect William, for your time. And it's very inspiring